Ladies and gentlemen, something strange has been happening in Iran and its environment for a while now. Ostensibly, it seems not to do with war or with anything military conflict. It seemed completely everything to do with the weather until some new details started emerging a few days ago. You see, back then, during the hot phase of the 40-day war, with the US and Israel that Iran fought, about at the middle, of the war, circa day 2021, I started seeing a particularly unusual reportage. As at then, it did not make a lot of meaning to me because I am not Iranian. I don't live in Iran, and I am not able to compare this year's weather in Iran to last year and previous years into 1, 2 decades ago. I just started reading back then that those nightly rallies that the Iranians used to do to support their government and to support their military were such that they were doing those rallies under torrential rain, sometimes under snow falling heavily during those rallies. What I did not know back then during the hot phase of the war was that those torrential rains and those snows were completely out of character compared to the previous 10, 20 years in Iran. Essentially, those torrential rains and those snow hills were happening out of season as against what used to happen before. As in the year before and the year before and the year before then. Those rains and those snows did not fall like that. They were completely dry those periods. That continued. I still did not see anything strange with respect to that until after the hot phase ended. And then reports started to come that in Iran, you know, rains are now starting to fall in a single day that did not fall in an entire year within the last 10 years at this time. There was also a report that snow is falling in April, and snow has never fallen in Iran in April for the past 10, 20 years. In fact, before the war started, in the lead up to the war, before February 28, one of the major socio-economic crises that the leadership of Iran faced was extremely low levels of water, extremely low levels of rain, very arid weather, almost completely non-existent, cases of falling snow, and in fact, very low levels of groundwater and groundwater reservoirs because rain was not falling. All the aquifers and the dams that they are set up to collect water were essentially dry. Things were so dry in Iran that it put a lot of political pressure on the government of President Pezeshkian. It was so bad that they are started to consider, absconding from the capital in Tehran and setting up another capital at a coastal city that was close to the Hormuz province, that area that hosted the Strait of Hormuz, essentially because of water, because of the absence of water, because of the arid nature of Tehran, because rain was simply not falling. The weather had become dry, had become arid, had become a mess. There was so much pressure from the too little rain they were experiencing all over Iran that President Trump and even Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel took advantage of it. And then they started a narrative that the fact that the weather had become arid and the country was essentially going dry and lacking water was technically the fault of the government of the day. And then Israel had the technology that could help them, which was desalination, the process of manufacturing desalination plants. However, Netanyahu started dangling the desalination solution, at the faces of the Iranians. If you want us to give you this technology and help you to suck water, salt water from the Persian Gulf and reconvert same for drinking and other purposes, the price you have to pay is to topple your own government. I read those narratives, enough of them on the media back then. But I was not connecting the dots. I was not seeing what was happening until, this phenomenon started. They now started to see rain that they had not seen in years before. They started seeing snow that they had not seen in years before, not just in terms of occurrence, but also in terms of large torrential volumes. Imagine rain that should fall, that used to fall in an entire year or two, falling in a single day in Iran. Dams that were essentially near dry started surging in terms of volumes of water. In fact, there is a particular lake in Iran called the Lake Urmia. Lake Urmia, Urmia, Lake Urmia. That lake had become essentially dry. For the first time in decades, that lake resurged and the aquifer filled up. And guess what? That is not all. It was also discovered that that phenomenon of the weather essentially recharging from global warming to global unwarming shall I call it Iranian warming to Iranian unwarming? Unwarming so much that the average temperature dropped by 5 degrees centigrade. That phenomenon did not just happen in Iran. It also happened in Iraq, and it also happened in southeastern Turkey. That was the phenomenon they experienced. Now, what other phenomenon came along this weather phenomenon they experienced? That phenomenon was that all these changes, all these drastic and positive changes in the weather in Iran, in Iraq, and in southeastern Turkey happened only after Iran had destroyed the network of US radar, radomes, and other satellite navigation infrastructure in the entire Persian Gulf environment and in the larger Middle East. In essence, while those radars were working, everything was dry and as arid as possible in Iran, in Iraq, and in southeastern Turkey. But the moment those radars were taken out by Iran, the moment those radars that connected to American and Israeli and allied satellites in space were disconnected, were destroyed, the weather did what? Picked up and bloomed and boomed. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Are you connecting the dots I'm connecting in my head? Let me add some other context for you. It will help you. You see, back then in Vietnam, the Americans actually experimented with weather control experiments, weather control technologies. What is weather control? Essentially, we want to be able to decide, as against the natural phenomenon from God, as to when rain falls, when rain does not fall, when snow falls, when snow does not fall, and where it falls and does not fall. Weather control is about getting humans to be able to choose. We want rain to fall at these places. We don't want them to fall at these places. We want snow to fall at these places. We don't want it to fall at these places. We want rain and snow to flow at this time, but not at this time. The Americans actually, played around with such experiments in Vietnam. Again, let me add some more context for you. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have been experiencing in the past few years some strange weather phenomenon. Heavy, out of character rainfall. We're suddenly starting to see Saudi Arabia and UAE experiencing flood, massive floods, 1 year volume of rains in a single day. Those floods were so out of character that those floods used to affect them disproportionately because their water infrastructure, their gutters and their drainages were built in a way as not to expect floods. So those floods used to affect them by far more than the usual because the drainages were not built ab initio. Because they were a much more arid environment, the drainages were not built ab initio to actually handle and channel and dissipate those excess waters. So in the past, Saudi Arabia and UAE used to experience out of character, out of culture excess rain, while Iran, Iraq, and Turkey, who are ostensibly not stricto sensu American and Israeli allies, were dry and arid. Now, the radars are gone. The radars are shut down, and Iran, Iraq, and southeastern Turkey are starting to have massive and torrential rainfall and snow. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Are you connecting what I'm connecting? Let me hear your comments in the comment section. Let me see your comments there. Thank you very much.